waste. This could have been such a sweet deal for us.
Yeah. Bad luck.
Hello and welcome back to a Squirrel Plays. It's time for one of those videos where I ramble for an unspecified amount of time and fail to make a point. And today's topic of disaster is the great debate of whether you should use pre-written modules for your TTRPG game or make something up yourself. Now, I would like to start off by defining a few things so we're all on the same page. First off, this is not specific to any game. I'll probably be using images of modules from Dungeons & Dragons, but by no means am I referring to those and only those. If you watched my last video, you know that EasyD6 recently dropped their own module of sorts, and if you watched my Mouse Ritter video, you would know that I played the pre-written adventure in the back of the rulebook, which is essentially a module of its own. So modules are not game-specific in this video unless mentioned otherwise. Second thing to define is the word module or pre-written. What do I mean when I say those things? By module or pre-written, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding it is essentially an adventure you can buy with real-world money. The book contains a plot and all the characters and probably some maps as well, depending on the module, and items and weapons to go along with the questing, and supposedly all the stuff you will need to run an adventure. The adventure can be short enough for a one-shot or long enough for a campaign, again, depending on the module you purchase. And lastly, by homemade or homebrew, I do not mean an entire homebrew game. I mean a homebrew adventure. You make up whatever maps or items or weapons and whatnot that you want to use in that adventure. If you are playing in the D&D world, you could use all their creations and locations and all that good stuff. Or if you just want to use D&D's rule set, you can do that and make up your own entire world. Either way you go about it, I'm lumping all of that into the same words, homemade and homebrew. And with that cleared up, let's try and figure this out. Which is better, homemade or pre-written? Well, the answer is easy. It's homemade. If you use a module for your game, you're an uncreative loser with no imagination. And that's it. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. Don't forget to like and subscribe and leave a comment.
You see what I did there? I'm so funny, guys.
All right, there's a reason I didn't quit my day job for comedy. In case it wasn't clear, I am just kidding. There's pros and cons to both ways, and that's what we're going to be talking about. And if you're hoping I would claim one is better than the other, well, let me go ahead and spoil the ending for you. The one you're able to use to run a game is the one that's better, and we're going to spend the rest of the video trying to figure out what I mean by that. Other than sometimes being overpriced, what's the unfortunate stigma behind pre-written adventure modules? Something I've often heard is what I joked about earlier. Some people do think they are for the creatively bankrupt, the unimaginative, the boring. But you know what? If everyone was creative, our audiences would be terrible. Think about it. I enjoy writing. And if you didn't know, I wrote my own book. Hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. A link in the description. But if everybody also was a creative writer, my audience would suck. Instead of enjoying it and going on the adventure, they'd spend the time dissecting it and seeing how well it holds up, looking for ways characters could have been developed better, and if there were any plot holes, that kind of thing. That's just the way we are. It's hard to sit back and just enjoy something that's in your line of work or your preferred craft. So it's okay to be a little creatively bankrupt. Unless your job is to be creative. If that's the case, then it's a very bad thing and you need to find a new line of work. But my point is, there's no shame in that. Not everybody has the creative juice running through their veins, and they don't need it either. You can still run a decent game using a module, and you're not a lesser GM for it. However, that doesn't mean modules don't have problems of their own. One issue is, as silly as it sounds, they can lead you into a false sense of security. Let's be honest, just about anything can happen in a TTRPG session. You never know what the players are going to come up with. A module can't predict or plan for everything. If it did, the module would be ginormous and you'd never be able to finish reading it. It can, however, certainly take a load off your shoulders, but you're still going to get caught unprepared at one point or another. I've heard more than a few tales of people running a game with a module thinking they were good to go, and then things went off the rails almost immediately. Another bad thing about modules is they just don't work for some people, and yes, I am one of those people. Some people I've talked to thought it was due to the fact I enjoy creating things myself and all that jazz, but in truth, it's just easier for me to make stuff up. And as a matter of fact, as I'm recording this, technically I'm supposed to be making stuff up for this weekend's game, but, well, here we are. Some of you already know this, but when I first stepped into the world of TTRPGs and had to GM a campaign, it was recommended to me to use a module. The idea was that it would tremendously reduce my workload, since I was completely new to, well, quite literally everything. Not only had I never GM'd before, I had more or less never even played the game. I had little to no clue what the rules were, and here I was in a position to govern them. So naturally, I thought, well, yeah, that's probably a good idea. All I'll have to worry about is the rules and just go from point A to point B as the module dictates. It didn't sound like the most creative and fun thing, but it sounded like something I should be able to handle. Well, as most plans go, it did not go. I purchased the Dragon Heist module, watched a couple different streams of people playing through the first parts of it to get an idea on how things go and what to expect. Then I watched a ton of other YouTube videos on general GMing and whatnot. Then I loaded the module into a new Roll20 game, and it went downhill from there. Now, say what you will about the module. You can argue whether it's a bad module or a well-written module, but the problem is I couldn't keep up with the information. It was too much for my little squirrel brain to keep up with and process. I kept forgetting names, things that were supposed to happen. I left out important details that would help the players along. And while, yes, part of that was just being new and timid, but my brain is really, really bad at retaining information like that. Now, whether I'm just dumb or got some mental issues, who knows? But it really doesn't change the end result. And I'm not alone in this either. Others struggle with the same thing. When you read a book, even if you're bad at it like me and struggle to retain a lot of the information, you can still kind of get the gist of what's going on. But for a module, you have to read the book and retain lots of specific details. Your players depend on it. It's almost like you have to memorize the book, or at least parts of it in chunks. I'm currently trying to read a book where the 3 characters the story's currently following are Citra, Faraday, and Rowan, and yes, I did have to go look that up when I was writing this. That's because I keep thinking their names are Citrus and Friday, but Rowan gets to keep his because I watch Viva La Dirt League, which makes that a lot easier to remember. Now, could I tell you any of the other names mentioned in the story? Not a single one. But in a module, you don't really get that luxury unless you want to constantly stop and keep looking stuff up, and Lord knows, if you're playing 5e, there's already enough of that going on. It's also just really not great when you're in the middle of dialogue and you say something like, "And then, brave adventurers, you need to go to the castle of, I forgot the name. It was the one with the little pointy red roofs on it. You know the one just past the junkyard." Not the most immersive thing. And if you're wondering how the rest of the adventure went in the module I used, well, I ended up tossing the whole thing out. We pushed our way through the intro quest, the players got the manor that came with it, and that was it. The whole heist was scrapped, partly because I completely forgot to give them the clues and stuff they needed to know about the massive hoard of goodies they could find, but also because I wanted absolutely nothing to do with it anymore. I made up my own story from there, and things went a lot more smoothly. For me, it's just so much easier to make up some characters and problems, and since I did a little more than just read about them in a book, I'm able to remember them. I still forget things from time to time, but it happens a lot less. So, what about homemade? Well, I prefer it, that's for sure, and sometimes I think the only reason I prefer it is because it's just easier for me. But I will admit I do enjoy creating things. I enjoy creating the characters, putting together random monsters and puzzles, and yes, of course, drawing the maps. But by no means does this put me above any other GM on the market. I play as the GM instead of the player because that's the part I enjoy. Writing worlds and characters is fun for me, and in a TTRPG, I not only get to share those creations with other people, but they get to help mold it. They get to dive into that world and not only explore it, but change its future and development. They determine what happens once they're in there, and you know, that's pretty cool. Sure, it rarely, if ever, goes the way I would prefer it to go, but that's not important. Having fun is what's important. But does Homebrew have any downsides of its own? Yes, 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 of course. As a matter of fact, homebrewing has a huge problem. Well, sit back, Sonny, and let me tell you a story about time and how I lost it. Oh, love it. Oh, because I wanted to make a homebrew world. Unfortunately, homebrewing takes a lot of your time. If you're on a time crunch, it might be a bad idea, depending on how much work you put into your homebrewing. Which, now that I say it, that probably would be a good video on its own. How much time and love do you put into your own homebrew world? But to try and stay on track, it can be really easy to get carried away when creating your world. But even if you're good at managing yourself and staying the course, it can still be a lot of work. Making maps takes time. Finding and making tokens takes time. Coming up with custom abilities takes time. Plotting a story, creating characters and their motivations, designing traps and puzzles, all of that takes time. And let's face it, we seem to be getting less and less of that as, well, time goes on. So really, when it comes to choosing between homebrew or modules, I honestly don't think that one is superior to the other. I'll admit, for a period there, I did kind of look down on the idea of using modules, but I think that was mostly just because I'm a cheapskate and I hate spending money. If you're not sure what you should use, I think there's a couple things you should ask yourself. The first question would probably be, how does your brain work? And by that, I mean, are you like me and you suck at retaining information you've read? If so, then a module might not be the way to go for you, or at least not a complicated one. The next question would be is, how much time do you have? If you're typically a busy individual and don't find yourself with a lot of free time, homebrewing might not be the best option. If the desire to create is still there, but the time isn't, nothing is stopping you from adding your own personal twists and tweaks to a module. And if you accrue multiple modules over time, well, who's to stop you from mixing and matching to create something completely different? And the last question would be is, what brings you joy? Is it creating worlds, characters, weapons? Is it building everything up from scratch or just parts? Is it creating anything or is it just running the game? Try to figure out what does it for you and then lean into that. Maybe you really like making custom weapons and items, but that's about it. Pick up a module and fill it with crazy loot to find. If you just like running a game, then, well, the answer's pretty simple. I think by now you get the idea of what I'm trying to say. While homebrewing definitely opens up more options and more games to play, it doesn't necessarily make it better than a module. Remember, your homebrew is made by you and only you, whereas a module usually has multiple people behind it, or at least tested by multiple people. That means it's already hopefully gone through the tests of fire and it's now can hold its own. It's discovered some of its weak points and has attempted to correct them, or at least typically, that's how a module goes. Obviously, some stinkers will still get through. But what about you? Where do you stand on the whole thing? Do you think modules are nothing more than a cheap cash grab? Should every GM learn to create their own thing? Or perhaps you're the one that thinks you should only use modules. Which one are you?
The choice is yours. Yeah.